Hello everyone, in today's video, we'll explore the logical functions in Microsoft Excel. We'll begin with the basics, covering essential logical functions like if, and or statements. Next, we'll dive into more advanced logical functions, such as IFS and switch statement, along with the error handling functions like IFERROR and IFNA. Finally, we'll consolidate everything we've learned and apply it to create an interactive Excel report. With that, let's start off by looking into the if statement. The if function helps you evaluate a certain argument, and depending upon whether the argument is true or false, it will return a specified value. Let's go to exercise 1 of the file provided. Here we have a table which shows sales for 3 different scenarios: actual, budget, and last year. In the 4th column in this table, I want to return yes if the actual sales are higher than the budget, and no if the actual sales are lower than the budget. We can achieve it via the if function. So I'm going to write the if function. There are 3 arguments for the if function: logical test, value if true, and value if false. In the logical test, I'm going to ask the formula to test if D7, which is the sales for the actual, is it higher than the sales for the budget. And if it is higher, I want the formula to return yes. Otherwise, I want the formula to return no. And then I can drag the formula down, and there we go. All the rows where the actual sales are higher than the budget, the formula has returned yes. Next, we will learn about the AND function. Let's go to exercise number 2. The AND function is another logical function which helps you evaluate multiple arguments and will return true if all the arguments are true. Let's understand by way of an example. Again, we have the same table which we had in exercise 1. We have sales by product for 3 scenarios. In this exercise, I want to return yes if the actual sales are higher than the budget as well as higher than the last year. And if that's not the case, I want the formula to return no. In this situation, I can use the AND function to evaluate the argument for me. In the AND function, you can provide as many logical arguments as you want, but you have to provide at least one argument for the formula to work. So in this function, I'm going to provide D7 greater than budget. This is my first logical argument that I want the formula to evaluate. And then if that is true, I want the function to evaluate whether actual is also greater than the last year's sales. And then I'll close the formula, press enter, and then drag the formula down by pressing Ctrl D. Here you can see wherever the actual sales are greater than both the budget as well as last year, the formula has returned true. So far, the AND function is doing a good job, but we need to learn what's the practical application of the AND function. Right now, it's returning true or false, which is not something we can present on the face of the report. That's why the AND function is usually used in combination with other logical functions like the if function to produce meaningful results. Let's say I want to show yes in column G if the actual sales are higher versus the budget as well as versus the last year. To achieve this, we can wrap the AND function inside the if function. So if function takes the first argument as the logical test. In the logical test, we are providing this AND function with 2 logical arguments. And remember that if both the arguments are true, the AND function is going to return true. And if it returns true, what do we want the if function to return? We want it to return yes. Otherwise, we want to return no. An important piece to note about the AND function is that it will return true only if all the provided arguments are true. For example, take the case of machines where the actual sales are higher versus the budget, which means the first argument is true, but the actual sales are lower versus the last year, meaning the second argument is not true. Therefore, the AND function is returning false, consequently leading the if statement to give the final result of no. This takes us to the next logical function that we're going to learn, and that is the OR function. The OR function also evaluates several arguments that the user can provide and will return true if even one of the argument is true. To understand the application of the OR function, let's take an example of this scenario. Here in this column, I want to return yes if the actual sales are higher versus either the budget or versus the last year. So let's first write the OR function. And in the OR function, I'm going to provide the first argument, actual higher versus budget. And then the second argument, I'm going to provide actual higher versus the last year, close it and go down. So as you can see, in cases where the actual is lower than the budget but higher than the last year, the formula has returned true. And also those cases where the actuals is higher versus the budget, lower versus the last year, those as well will be returned as true. Now again, to make the results more meaningful, we can wrap the OR function inside of the if function and put OR function as a logical test argument of the if function. And then I want to return yes if OR function returns true and no if the OR function returns false. Next, we will go to exercise number 4, where we're going to learn about another very important error handling function, which is called IFERROR. When working with complicated formulas in Excel, there's always a chance that these formulas might not work or throw up an error. In such a situation, you would want to make sure that the error doesn't appear on the face of the report. And for that, you can use error handling functions like IFERROR. Let's take an example of this one. Here, I want to calculate the growth in actual sales versus the last year. So I'm going to apply the formula, this year's sales divided by last year's sales minus 1, and then I'm going to drag the formula down. Now over here, there is no error and all the rows are calculating the growth correctly. However, imagine that in one of the cases, the last year number was 0, then it's going to throw an error. So in such a case, we don't want our reports to look like this, where we have errors appearing on the face of the report. In such a case, the IFERROR function comes in quite handy. The IFERROR function takes in 2 arguments. The first argument is the normal formula that we want Excel to work on. For example, this could be the growth formula in our case. And the second argument is the value that we want Excel to return in case if there is an error. So I'm going to put in an IFERROR. The first argument I'm going to keep the same, that is the growth formula. In the second argument, I want to tell what it should return if the growth formula doesn't work. And let's say I just want to return a blank cell in case if the first argument doesn't work. And that way, the IFERROR function can help you make your Excel reports look a lot cleaner. Now let's move to exercise 5, where we're going to learn about the IFS function. In exercise 1, we learned about the if function, which is used when you have a logical argument to evaluate, and based on whether the argument is true or false, you want to return back a certain value. IFS, as the name indicates, helps you evaluate several arguments and return the desired value if those arguments are true. To understand it better, let's work through an example. Here, in the first column, I have a month number, and in the second column, I want to return the name of the month. In this situation, I need a function in which I can give an argument that checks if the month number is 1, and if the month number is 1, it should return January. If the month number is 2, it should return February, and so on. In this case, the IFS function will be very helpful. The syntax for the IFS function is quite simple. You just need to provide a logical argument and the result you want to return if the logical argument is true. And you can provide up to, I think, 126 logical arguments in the IFS function. So I'm going to write the IFS function, open the bracket, and in my first argument, I will put C7 equal to 1. And if C7 is 1, I want to return January. If C7 is not 1, then I want the function to evaluate if C7 is equal to 2. So in my third argument of the function, I'm going to put C7 equal to 2. And if that's the case, I want the formula to return February. And the list will go on. So I'll fast forward the video over here so I can write the full formula. So I've completed the formula here. I have given all the month numbers from 1 to 12, and for each month number, I have defined what name I want the function to return. I'm going to hit the enter and drag the formula down. So it works fine so far. Now let's say there's a mistake in the month number and we have a month number called 13. What will happen if this formula encounters a month number 13? To find out, let's drag the formula down and we get an error. The reason why we get an error is because we haven't told the function what to do if the month number is 13. We have only provided month number 1 to 12. To handle these kind of situations, we can use the error handling function. We just learned about the IFERROR function. You can use that as well over here. Another error handling function which you can use is the if and a. If NA works very similar to the if error. It has two arguments, value and value if NA. So we're going to wrap the if statement or the if S statement inside of the if NA function. The first argument of the if NA function, I will provide the if S statement which we have just developed. And in the second argument, we can put what we want the formula to return in case of an error. So here I can put month number should be between 1 and 12. Let's press enter, and there we go. The error is gone and it's returning month number should be between 1 and 12. Let's move to our next exercise, which is exercise 6, and here we're going to learn about the switch function. The switch function is very similar to the IFS function. It helps you evaluate several arguments and return the respective result depending upon which argument is true. The syntax of the switch function is slightly different. In switch function, you have three mandatory arguments. First, you need to provide an expression which you want the formula to evaluate. Next, you need to provide the value against which you want the expression to be evaluated. And third, you need to provide the value you want the function to return if the evaluation is true. Let's try to solve the next example to get a better understanding. We will solve the same problem with switch statement which we just did with the if-s, that is, we want to return the month name depending upon the month number. So I will open the switch statement. The first argument is the expression. The expression I want to evaluate is cell C7. The next argument is the value. The value against which I want the expression to be evaluated is 1. The third argument is the result. This means what do I want the formula to return if the value in the cell C7 is 1. So I want to return January. If the expression does not evaluate to 1, then what do I want the formula to do? I want to check if the value is 2. So my fourth argument, I will put the value of 2, and the result 2 will be February. And the list will go on, so I'll fast forward the video for a few seconds to complete writing the formula. So I've completed the formula here. Let's hit enter and drag the formula down. Now, similar to what we saw in exercise number 5, if the month number is 13, the switch statement is also going to give an error. And if needed, you can wrap the switch statement also inside of an if NA function to handle the errors. Next up, we will solve a slightly more complicated scenario. Here, we want to return the quarter number depending upon the month number, such that if the month number is 1 to 3, we want to return Q1. If the month number is between 4 to 6, we want to return Q2, and so on. For this situation, we can use the switch statement as well. In the first argument of the switch statement, I will put true, and note that this true is itself a function. It's not just simply the text true, it's the function true. For the value, I'm going to write cell C7 is less than or equal to 3. If the cell C7 is less than or equal to 3, this expression over here is going to return true as well. And the expression against which we want it to be evaluated is also true. So if these both are true, what do we want the formula to return? We want it to return Q1. Now, what if the C7 is not less than or equal to 3? We wanted to check if it is less than or equal to 6. So I'm going to provide that in the argument number 4. And if it is less than or equal to 6, what do we want to return? We want to return Q2. And the list will go on. So I'll just fast forward the video here. So I'll complete writing up the formula. In the next exercise, we will consolidate all the learnings and apply them to develop this interactive Excel report. In the first column of the report, we have the product names. In the next two columns, we have the options for the users to select a scenario. And the third column is the variance. So for now, the report is showing variance between actual and the last year sales numbers. If the user selects budget, the report will automatically show the budget numbers. Or they can select any other scenario as well. Let's say, for example, the forecast. So let's start off. Go to the dashboard sheet where you will find the report with some pre-populated data. We need to set up the formulas in a way that the report stays dynamic and changes according to the user inputs. We have this sheet over here which is called actuals. Actually, we should rename it as data because it has the sales for the different scenarios. We have the products over here, and then we have the 4 columns which shows the sales for the different scenarios. Now, in order to pick up the values from the other sheet, we will use the VLOOKUP function. So I'm going to put VLOOKUP, and then I'm going to specify the table array, which is over here. And then actual is in the second column, so I'm going to put 2, and then return the exact match, and make sure that the formula is referencing absolute, and there we go. So we have the sales for the actuals. Now, I want to keep it dynamic because the user might select budget tomorrow. So what we will need to do is that this particular VLOOKUP formula is picking up the numbers from actual, but then if the user specifies budget, then instead of column number 2, I want the formula to pick up the values from column number 3. What we can do is apply a switch formula, and then in the expression, I'm first of all going to specify this cell because this is the cell that we want the formula to evaluate. Then we want the formula to see if it is actual. Yes, if it is actual, then return the VLOOKUP formula, which is over here. If it is not actual, then we want it to check if it is budget. If it is budget, then we want to return the same formula, however, a different column. So here, after the budget, we're going to say that we want to return, we want the VLOOKUP to pick up from column number 3. Next, we want the formula to check in case if it is also not budget, then we want to check if it is forecast. Again, we want it to return a VLOOKUP function, but this time, instead of column number 2 or 3, it will be column number 4. And then lastly, we want to check if it is last year. And if it is last year, then we want again to return VLOOKUP as well. But this time, instead of column number 4, we're going to give column number 5. Now we will close the switch function and drag this formula down. Sorry, we forgot to. So we will freeze the rows, but not the columns, and then drag this formula down, and then drag the formula right. In the variance column, it will always be the same. So this minus this will be our variance. Now, if instead of actual, I'm going to put budget, the values will be picked from the budget column. And let's say instead of forecast, if we put last year, it will be picked up from last year. Before I finish the video, I also want to mention that there are many other ways to achieve the same effect. For example, one way to achieve this could be to use a combination of VLOOKUP and match functions. And in fact, the formula syntax will be much simpler if you follow that approach. If you want to learn more on that, please check out my detailed video on Excel lookup functions.